I remember breaking down and saying, I don't know why I'm alive, and I don't know why this happened, but it didn't shake me. We were living fast, and we were living in a way that had little to no regard of our health and our safety, and what we were doing to our bodies and what we were doing to others around us, what we were doing to our families. And that lifestyle was just so seductive. I guess at the time I felt really free to do what I wanted to do and feel like I was in a position where no one could tell me otherwise. I would later move on to going to college and passing to get a business certificate, all the while still kind of exploring new drugs, exploring new levels of drinking, and just really broken relationships. Were just a regular occurrence in my life. I realized, though, there was always something that kept me from going just one step too far. People around me would be just going one step crazier with drugs, or one step further with their lifestyle, or just abuse or fighting. And there was always something inside of me that said, no, you're not a violent person. You're not going to get into fights. You're not going to drop these drugs because that's not you, and that's too far. So for some reason, I always had this level that was like, okay, this is where I'm going to stop. So it was a rough town, and if you found rough friends, they knew rougher people, and if you got connected with those people, then you're dabbling with some really scary stuff. I remember there was one time when I had met this one guy at a bar, and I knew that he was dealing cocaine, and I had, in my thirst for money, in my desire to be a big shot, I wanted to get a piece of the action, and I knew that if I became friends with this guy, maybe I could make some money off him. And I remember one night we went around dealing it to a couple people, and it was an all-night thing. We were going into the dingiest, dirtiest places in town, trying to sell a little bit of drugs to people who were in no position to afford to buy this stuff. And I remember the next day I had made a little bit of money, and I wanted to double it up. And so I gave cash to this one guy who was going to turn that into a larger amount of money. And I remember he got caught by the police at a bar with my cash and was put in prison. I remember going to the police station saying, hey, this guy has some cash of mine, can I get it back? And I remember them starting to question me about, why does he have this cash? And obviously he was a drug dealer. And, it just shows how short-sighted I was and how focused on myself I was at that time. When I was 20, my friend had passed away from drinking and driving, and I knew that I needed to get out of the small town and separate myself and just look into doing something with myself, because the future didn't seem clear for me. So I moved into the big city of Winnipeg, which was only 45 minutes away, but it was just something I wanted to do. I wanted to go to university, and I wanted to work in restaurants. And I was never scared to take on new things. I think my father has always been an entrepreneurial farmer, and a lot of those skills were passed down to me. When I moved to Winnipeg, I started working in fine dining restaurants, and it was a good thing. It was a step out of the small town that I grew up with, and kind of a step into a suit and tie sort of job. And I remember enjoying it. I remember really learning a lot, and I remember the fact that I could make good cash on the side, and that could pay for nice clothes and just material things that I was really after. I got introduced to nightclubs. I got introduced to lots of people, guys and girls who were in the industry, who were all kind of chasing after the same stuff. Party drugs came on the scene. As I went through my early 20s, I can recognize now that the need for acceptance and the need for belonging had grown into the same thing, really, just as an adult. So my need for acceptance in the city, amongst coworkers, amongst business people. I wanted to make a name for myself. I was pretty committed to becoming something out of nothing, and it led me to open up a restaurant of my own in 2012 when I was 23. And I had dropped out of university to open up a restaurant and just learn from experience. And I wanted to make sure people knew who Kelvin Peters was, and that we could succeed in business, and that I could take control of my life, that I could take a sidestep from the partying and start to focus on, okay, where am I going in life? God, for me, at that time, was non-existent. I couldn't say I don't think I was an atheist, but I didn't have to live in a place where anyone asked me about faith or how I was doing. I could keep myself at an arm's length distance from everyone so that no one had to ask me any of those questions, and I was comfortable like that. I knew that one day there might be a time when I had to have to readdress, okay, who is God in my life, and do I believe in him really? But for that time, life was sweet, just living on my own. So about a year into running the restaurant, we realized, and we were forced to close. Basically, our cash flow was very low, and we couldn't maintain the business to be operating. So we had to make the decision to close. I had spent a couple of years really pouring out myself and my time into that place. It was a very, very much a labor of love, and it had become my identity. I was now this guy in a suit working downtown, owning a restaurant, and all my friends and all of my circles were attached to that as well. So when that closed, the friends and the connections, a lot of them were lost, and I felt very empty inside for the first time. I remember feeling like, hey, things really felt good, but I am left now feeling sad and empty and alone. And that became a really confusing time. I remember having to shut down the restaurant and take out all of the stuff, or else the banks would seize it, and taking the stuff out of the restaurant into the U-Haul and driving the U-Haul to the hospital where my sister was having her first child. And I remember my family was sitting there in the lobby, and they had helped out financially in a lot of ways, and now it was all had just been crushed. It was gone. There was no more. And we were gonna take a very big loss, financially and personally. And that was the first time when I really felt like, I think first bouts of depression started to come in at that time. When you build your life up in a way that you think is going to move you forward, and then it's taken right from underneath you, it's pretty hard to find answers. And you begin to question who you are as a person. You begin to question what's going to satisfy my life now. And I took that as a sign that maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I wasn't good enough. And I saw times when I had made foolish decisions. I saw times when I had let relationships that were meaningless take up a lot of my time. I saw times when drugs and alcohol got in the way of my productivity, and I started feeling really negatively about myself and where I had gotten to. I didn't know what would be next, but I knew that restaurants had become what I knew and what I was passionate about, and so I wanted to stay working in the industry. When I was 25, 24, I went to work and helped open another large restaurant in town. It became very successful. We won Restaurant of the Year that year in the city, and it was a chance for me to get my feet back underneath me and for me to reestablish my name as someone who was successful in the industry. I hadn't dealt with the emotional things that I had gone through, and all the financial things that I had to deal with, and the phone calls and the tough conversations that I had to deal with as an owner representing employees, and all these people, all this network I had made had kind of been it just came to a halt. And so there's a lot of emotional hurt and a lot of financial hurt that I had experienced, and I just didn't take the time to deal with it. And I just started pouring myself into this new business. And so my identity just followed me wherever I worked. People didn't know who I was or what my cares were or what I really felt. Once again, just despite the success and despite the track record of this new restaurant, I chose to party lots and really went deep into the nightlife scene. I was always around lots of alcohol. I had appreciation for alcohol, but I also abused it. And it got to a point where I let it again get in the way of productivity, and my performance at work was suffering from abusing alcohol and drugs.